Hello all you happy people! I hope you all had a good Thanksgiving and are taking it easy as we enter the home stretch of 2024. Pretty soon I'm going to be building up my foreign and independent animated film recommendations, as well as my best list, so we should get on with our final films of the year. And let's start off with our last sequel. And this is definitely an odd one. We have our latest film from Walt Disney Animation Studios, and it's a sequel to one of their biggest films of the last decade. Moana 2. And I'll be honest, this was a film that I should have been excited for. But quite frankly, I just wasn't. I mean, don't get me wrong, I certainly wasn't dreading this film, but I just wasn't anxious to see it. And it's not because I didn't like the original Moana. On the contrary, I loved it. I thought it was such a stellar film from Walt Disney Animation Studios and another winning musical from them. It wasn't my favorite film from 2016, made by them. I'll talk about that more next year, but it was still pretty damn great. The story was exciting and a ton of fun, the animation was gorgeous and beautifully rendered, the characters were instantly iconic, with Moana and Maui being a great duo, and the songs by Lin-Manuel Miranda were instant classics. It's definitely another incredible Disney animation musical, and another stellar film from directors John Musker and Ron Clements. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's great. But that doesn't mean I needed to see a sequel to it. And I'll be honest, going into this sequel, I was kinda nervous. And there were 3 major reasons why. So let's go over them in order, and I think I should get the easiest reason out of the way first. I've been feeling burnt out by sequels lately. The 2020s have not been a great decade for animated sequels, in my opinion. Yes, we have gotten some great sequels this decade, don't get me wrong, but most of the sequels I've seen this decade so far have done nothing for me. I've either thought they were fine at best, or they were very bad at worst. If you want to know how much I've been unimpressed by the sequels of the 2020s, I've seen over 20 animated sequels since 2020. I've only really liked 6. That's not saying much. And I will say this, there are a couple of sequels coming out that I am actually very excited for, but yeah, we've gotten way too many sequels this decade, and most have done pretty much nothing for me. And some are for franchises I didn't need to see continuations of. Like, in this year alone, we got announcements for a 5th Shrek and a 6th Ice Age for 2026. That's insane. Seriously, what are you doing, Hollywood? Are you guys scared of the words, "the end"? Like, there's nothing wrong with those 2 words. It's okay for a long-running franchise to end. Ugh, but yeah, I'm kind of burnt out by sequels. Now, the second reason why I was nervous is that Walt Disney Animation Studios has not been doing very well this decade. Let me explain. When it comes to Disney animation, the many films they've released have been grouped together and broken up into several different eras. For example, the first 5 films, including Snow White, Pinocchio, Fantasia, Dumbo, and Bambi, are part of the Golden Era. And starting in 1989 and running throughout the 1990s, we've had films like The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and The Lion King, just to name a few. And this point was called the Renaissance. And throughout the 2010s, Disney animation was in another booming era that started in 2009 with The Princess and the Frog. This era was coined by many people as the Revival Era, and that led to several great films throughout the decade, including the original Moana. But now, I think it's clear the revival is over. Now, when this era ended is up for debate. Some say it ended with Frozen 2, some say it ended with Ralph Breaks the Internet. I've even met people who said it ended back with the first Moana. Personally, I think it ended with Encanto. Like, this being the last film of this era made sense, in the same way that Tarzan was the last film of the Renaissance period. It was the most recent Disney animation film that a lot of people saw and really loved, it became a household staple, and also managed to snag an Academy Award. But after that, it just hasn't been the same. Even though I personally enjoyed Disney Animation's previous 2 films, they definitely were disappointing and didn't live up to the heights that they wanted to. Not to mention, neither one made that much money. I'm not sure what this era of Disney animation is going to be called in a few years from now, but For now, let's just call it the post-revival era. And lately, to shake things up, Disney Animation had a new management shakeup, with Jennifer Lee stepping down from her post as creative chief officer and being replaced by Jared Bush as a way to get things back on track. And hopefully, I think they'll be able to by the end of the decade. We'll just have to wait and see. And the third reason why I was nervous is arguably the biggest one of all. Moana 2 was not initially intended to be made as a film. For those that don't know, this project was announced by the studio back in 2020, not as a feature film, but as a TV series made for Disney Plus that was initially scheduled for release in 2023, before it was pushed back by 1 year. And that seemed to make sense. More further adventures with Moana on the open seas as a TV adventure? I like that idea. But then all of a sudden, back in February, Disney suddenly announced Moana 2 and that the series had indeed been reworked into a feature film. And it just came out of the blue. I had just uploaded my review of The Tiger's Apprentice when this news dropped, and you can imagine how shocked I was reading this. But the news only made me have questions bubble up inside my head, as well as a few worries. I'm not opposed to the idea of turning a TV series into a film. In fact, I've gotten that idea several times of trying to take an animated narrative show and edit it into a coherent feature film, and I might make a video essay on that one day. But I was curious on when this decision was made, and if this was a creative one, and not a financial one, and if they had enough time to turn this into a film. By all accounts, this decision seemed to have been made sometime in 2023, and they stated that they did it because they thought the story was so strong it would be better for theaters. But I had my doubts. Disney Animation was coming off of Wish, which did not do well critically or financially, and while they did have another animated film slotted for this year, it wasn't officially revealed at the time Wish was released. I've heard rumors that this was another original film that was nowhere near ready, and that it was delayed to give it more time to develop. And it seemed like a safe bet to take the Moana series intended for Disney Plus and turn it into a feature film and maybe get some critical and commercial success again, especially considering Moana became a huge film for Disney in the past few years. I was worried that this decision was very last minute and was less of an artistic choice made by the creatives to put a great story on the big screen, and more of a panic move made by nervous execs desperate for a hit. I remember even seeing a promo for the film at my theater that stated, "See Moana 2 the way it was always meant to be seen, on the big screen." And I just felt the embarrassment hearing it. Because this was not initially intended for the big screen, and some of those trailers did start to show the seams of the original show version. So, yeah, I was nervous about this. It didn't look terrible at all, but I just didn't know if it was going to cross the finish line fully intact. But I still held on to a little bit of hope. The film certainly didn't look terrible, and I have enjoyed Disney animation sequels before in the past. Maybe this could be a fun time. And after seeing it, I can say... I have very mixed feelings about Moana 2. I do not think this is a bad movie at all. Far from it. In fact, the good stuff in this film is really, really good. But I have to be completely honest and say that this film doesn't reach the heights of the first film and just left me hungry for more. I'll get to it more when I talk about the film in depth, but man, I really think the decision to turn this story into a film last minute really harmed it more than they realized. When we last left our heroes, Moana restored the heart of Te Fiti, heals the ocean, and becomes the new wayfinder of her people, setting sail on the open seas with Maui. 3 years have passed since the first film, and Moana, played again by Alili Carvalho, is on the search for people and inhabited islands out on the ocean. One day, alongside Pua and Heihei, she discovers a pot with carvings proving there was life outside her island. She returns home to her people and her little sister Samea. One day, though, during a ceremony, Moana is given a prophecy by the gods that her people are in danger from a guy called Nalo if they don't find the lost island of Motufitu. And so, Moana sets sail in search of the mysterious island alongside a new crew, including a clumpy farmer named Kele, played by David Fane, a quirky axe chopper named Lodo, played by Rose Matafeo, an artist and Maui fanboy named Moni, played by Hawaii Chang, And of course, the shape-shifting demigod himself, Maui, played again by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. So, how do I talk about this? Okay, there is a lot to unpack here, and I guess I should start off with my positives, and for what it's worth, I do have plenty. First off, let's talk about the animation, which is easily the film's biggest highlight. This movie is gorgeous. It's easily one of the best looking animated films that has come out this year, and you can tell Walt Disney Animation Studios went above and beyond crafting this film. It never once looked like this was initially intended for Disney Plus, and it does look breathtaking. I think the sets in particular, with a giant clam the crew comes across, is the biggest highlight. The film is colorful, rich, and quite impressive. This just is a wonderful looking movie. Another big plus of the film is Moana herself. She continues to be a very fun protagonist, and one who's smart, courageous, and daring, and you can really see her coming to grips with this new journey. Also, she shares a really nice bond with her little sister, which I thought was genuinely touching and nice. And like always, Alili Cravalia shines greatly as her. She's an exceptional actress. As far as other pluses go, I really love the way the film fleshed out the Kakamora, the coconut creatures from the first film. They were basically just a big threat in that movie, but here, they're given a lot more depth and showcase why they are a bit hostile. And one of them ends up joining Moana's ragtag team, and he was cute. Maui also has his moments, including the film's best song, Can I Get a Chihu, which was just as colorful and catchy as You're Welcome. That was a total blast. I also really love the Maui fanboy character Moni. He really has a ton of great laughs in here and is easily the biggest scene stealer of the film, with one of the biggest laugh out loud moments being where he ends up drawing an awkward moment where Moana high-fives Maui's tattoos, and the drawing just makes it look like she's touching his abs. That was great. I also thought the opening number We're Back was pretty good. It sets you in the mood and draws you in back to this brilliant world, and the entire third act and climax is exceptional. It's gripping, dramatic, and leaves you on the edge of your seat. So yeah, there's tons of great stuff here. It does feel like they have the elements of a worthy continuation. But it feels like the film is missing things. This film really does feel like it started off as a TV show and was edited down into a film, and unfortunately, it wasn't edited very well. When watching this film, I could tell that there were things about it that just didn't flow correctly. Some of the scenes just stop before they finish, and it doesn't really let us process what happened. It was really apparent at the start of the film when Moana returns home and greets her little sister. As soon as she leaves, she does have a brief 1-minute scene with her, and when it seems like they're midway through the conversation, it suddenly cuts the two in a different location talking about something else. And then just after that, it cuts to Maui on his own adventure. There's a lot of these jarring edits throughout the film, and it just left me baffled. I wanted more of these scenes, more time to process what happened, but the film doesn't allow that. Even one moment where Moni has a near-death experience, after the big scene, it then immediately cuts to the characters already docked on an island. We don't even see them land, they're just already there. What happened? I know I've complained about films with terrible pacing this year, but the pacing is really not the problem with this film. It's the structuring and editing. It feels incomplete. I have seen some people claim this film feels like one of those direct-to-video Disney sequels that we got in the 2000s, and I vehemently disagree with that claim. There is a really good story in here, and one that feels like it's a worthy continuation of Moana's journey. But the problem is that it feels unfinished. It doesn't feel like I've got the full picture of the story by the end of the film, and that there was just a lot missing here. And that leads me into my other big problem with the film. The characters, because most of them are underdeveloped. Like I said, I really liked Moana's little sister Samea, and I thought the two shared a great bond together, but we don't see a whole lot of it. It's a shame, because I wanted more, and I think it would have really let a lot of the dramatic moments hit harder, especially when it came to pivotal moments like when Moana leaves the island with her crew. And speaking of them, I do like the characters we see, but I don't really feel like we got to know them very well apart from Moni. We have Lodo, and she's a bit over the top and kind of reckless as she constantly cuts stuff with her axe, and there's also Calais, who's a grumpy farmer trying to grow his plants, but they don't really get to accomplish much throughout the film or shine. There's also this woman who's surrounded by bats named Matangi, played by Awami Fraser, and she seemed like a worthy foe considering she works for the god Nolo. But again, we don't get a whole lot of her or really feel her presence. Like, let me make this clear. I don't think these characters were bad. Far from it. They at least have personality, they make a presence, and they feel three-dimensional. They're certainly way better than the flat, one-dimensional, and lifeless characters in Spellbound. But I just didn't feel like I knew them as much as I wanted to. They had the makings of great characters and worthy new ones in the Moana universe, but I just felt that by the end, I didn't fully get to know them as much as I should and fully care about them. Again, I think that's the biggest problem with the film. It's not that it's bad or anything, it's just incomplete. Don't get me wrong, this film is not a disaster in the same way other films that were essentially released unfinished, like The Snowman, as I can really see that there was a good film trying to get out of this, and I know that the people at Disney Animation were trying their best, but I do think that the decision to turn this from a show into a feature film really did a lot of damage in the long run. Or at least the decision to release it this year. I think Disney execs were really panicking and desperate for a hit, so they put this film out in 2024, and I don't think that was the right move. I'm not opposed to the idea of this story getting turned into a film, because this is a good story, and it has good characters. It's just that it needed a little more time in the oven. I think Disney Animation should have taken this year off and allowed this story more time to become a film. Honestly, I really do want to see the full story and original TV series version of this because there is a good version of this film in there. It's just not fully getting out. It kind of reminds me of the Beatles film Let It Be. There was so much footage and missing pieces that were completely cut from that original film that, while it was still competent in the end, it did feel like there was a lot missing. And eventually, we got the full picture with Get Back, decades later, that really showcases more about what was happening and let us really thrive in the moment. I really think that if we got the full-length, original, extended version of this story, I think I would genuinely love it and think it's great. But as is, Moana 2 is a perfectly fine, if incomplete film. Well, it does have some great animation, a few really good songs, and some nice new characters. The story, while pretty good, feels like it's missing pieces, as well as the characters who feel somewhat underdeveloped. I wouldn't call this a bad animated film by any means, as it really feels like there was a good film trying to get out of it, but the final film feels like it's missing pieces. It's basically an incomplete jigsaw puzzle. It doesn't fully live up to the heights of the first film, and doesn't really get across the finish line as fully intact as it could have. So, I think I'm gonna give Moana 2... a 6? Yeah, I guess a 6. Again, that's just for the version of the film we got. It's not bad, but it feels incomplete. There really is a great animated film that I think is trying to break through here, and I do hope one day that we can get the full story for this, because I do think if it was fully finished, this really could be an exciting and fun journey. But in the end, it just ended up being something I would consider a failed experiment more than a bad film. As is, this film has its moments, but due to its incomplete nature and feel, it sadly doesn't go as far as I hoped.
This is serious!
Is something distracting you?